Buddy, hello, welcome in, welcome in. We are very, very happy that you have decided to join us today. Welcome back to Trad Chat Live. I'm Jordan Pacheco, and man, we got a doozy today. I am been hoping that we would do this episode for a very long time and finally couldn't wait because I finally found the PDF. So we'll go ahead and let this populate for just a few more minutes, but this is going to be one heck of a show, man. I really have been looking forward to this. By the way, I hope y'all are having a really good Lent. And if you are, tell me how your penances are going. Mine goes okay. You know, some are sticking more than others, but this is probably getting closer to the midway point. So it's about time to probably reinvigorate myself on some of my penances. But for those who haven't given up social media, hey, this is a great penance, man, because we have one heck of a book today. Okay, let's just get into it. All right, so I have been... Obviously, the things that interest me more so than I think theological channels in the traditional sphere is really culture. And that's what part of this podcast has found. And so sometimes throughout this show, we've gone through a couple of different cultural pieces, especially around the time of the changes. So if you remember for our 1,000 subscriber special, for those of you who've been here since the very beginning, Rudy and I, we went through The New American Catholic, which was an NBC documentary based in the late 60s, right after the council, just getting essentially the thoughts of what people were thinking of when it came to the council. And that was, I think, a very eye-opening thing for a lot of folk. And so I want to kind of continue that as a sort of series. There is a lot of, you could say, primary source documentation about the confusions that happened in the 60s and in the 70s in particular that I feel like the church has just memory hold. And so when I find these things, it actually is very helpful for traditionalists because we can find out what went wrong, and then perhaps more importantly, we can figure out how to best restore things. So we'll go ahead and enter, but the book in question today, one that I've been hoping that we'd get a chance to talk about, is this flippin' thing. This is called Environment and Art in Catholic Worship. The particular version that we're seeing online here, and again, I've linked it below, so if you want to kind of take a look, then you're more than welcome. This comes from 1978, and the version that I have immediately, I have this copy right here. This comes from 1977, November 1977. So we're in kind of the memory hold decade of the Catholic Church. I think that we're in for a little bit of fun here. If you've heard of this book before, definitely love to hear your reactions. Maybe some of you who might remember when this thing came out are cringing. Please, Jordan, please no. Well, we can't go back. So before we begin, what I want to do, how I'd like to set this up is we're going to go through some blurbs that the book talks about first, and then there's going to be examples. So what you're going to see is this is what I say is one of the books that ruined the church. And maybe you've seen a bit of the title, right? Trash Boomer book, I think is what I put in the thumbnail. And the reason why is because even though this wasn't necessarily adopted by the entirety of the USCCB, as we'll get to before we begin, this nonetheless was a very authoritative book. It contained a lot of authoritative writings on the topic of liturgy and how to best peruse the space as per coming out of the council and afterwards, of course. And then more importantly, this also represents, I think, what the worst reformers sought to actually do, and also demonstrates the speed in which they do so. This is just a little bit beyond a decade after the council. But what's important to note is that this actually is not the first book to come out like this. There's actually a companion on Catholic music. In fact, you see it here in the foreword. The following statement on art and environment in Catholic worship has been designated as a companion to the 1972 statement of the Bishops' Committee on the Liturgy entitled Music in Catholic Worship. So that's something next that I think I'll get my hands on. Let's talk about what happened with music in that decade following the council. By the way, hello everyone who's tuning in. I hope you guys enjoy the show today. It's going to be fun. So like I said, we're going to go through a couple of particular points that I found inside the document just to give us a thought of what's going on at the time. And we can now see the fruits of it almost 50, 60 years onward from when this thing was written. And then one of my favorite parts about this book is it actually gives examples. It actually shows pictures of what the liturgy should look like and what the liturgical space should look like and what the baptistry should look like and all these things. And you'll actually see in this flippin' book, you will actually see recordations immediately following the council. So we're all kind of children of this. This is, I think, probably to the heart of what a lot of trads are fighting for and what a lot of people who may have an attachment to the new mass themselves realize. But before we begin, I just wanted to read just a little bit of its history here. So when I go to the USCCB's website about this particular book, they say, Environment and Art in Catholic Worship is a 1978 statement from the Bishops' Committee on the Liturgy. The purpose of the document is to provide principles for those involved in preparing liturgical space. You'll see. The committee statement received the approval of the administrative committee in keeping with conference policy. Because the document was not proposed as a statement of the whole Conference of Bishops, the full body of bishops was never asked to consider it. So the question is, how authoritative is this thing? How much of the changes are to be blamed because of this book? Environment and Art in Catholic Worship does not have the force of law and of itself. It is not particular law for the Diocese of the United States of America, but a commentary on that law by the Committee for the Liturgy. However, it does quote several documents of the Apostolic See in a sense, and in that sense, it has the force of the documents it quotes in the areas where the documents legislate. The Bishops' Committee on Liturgy has appointed a task group to revisit environment and art in Catholic worship. The revised document, entitled Built on Living Stones, was approved by the full body of bishops at the November 2000 meeting. So 22 years after this thing we're about to read, and that's probably going to be the next thing I'd like to read, Built on Living Stones. So let's get into it, friends. This is a little bit of environment and art in Catholic worship. I have a list here of particular points that I wanted to highlight. And what you're going to hear is that this is the little booklet that touches on why we should have contemporary liturgy and why we should have contemporary minimal spaces and all the other things, and why perhaps the trappings of traditional Catholicism, those statues and altar rails and other things, pews for heaven's sake, are now actually hindrances in this new springtime of the new evangelization. So the first page I want to hit to, let's hop to page 12 actually, because I'll move my screen over here just to make sure, because this is point number 7. So I love this because you can kind of tell how the door is opening. Also, pay attention to how these are written. And if you want to pause your screen and read some of this, I've of course linked the PDF below. But again, if you just kind of want to read along too, that might be totally fine as well. So here's what it says. If we maintain that no human words or art forms can contain or exhaust the mystery of God's love, but that all words and art forms can be used to praise God in the liturgical assembly, then we look for criteria to judge music, architecture, and the other arts in relation to public worship. Kind of a word salad, right? So when you think about how do the liberals in the church write, when you're confused about maybe how Pope Francis writes, this is essentially where it came from, because I don't exactly know what that means, but I can tell you just a couple of things. First off, this book, I've been looking all over. I can't find, let me see if I can even find it here. I don't think it makes mention. Oh, there we go. It has one reference out of 9 for the Eucharist in all these early pages, which I was studying. I couldn't find it. So I'm glad that that's there. I think sacrifice probably appears in this thing. Oh, sacrifice appears 3 times. This one we'll get to, the living sacrifice, the living meal, right? That meal language that crept into our talk about the celebration of the Mass. A living sacrifice, there it is, to intentionally gather in God's presence. Look at this. We're just going to be skipping around for a second, but here it is. The human experience, oh Lord. To gather intentionally in God's presence is to gather our total selves, our complete persons, a living sacrifice. What does that even mean? Other human activities tend to be more incomplete, specialized, and to claim one or the other facet of ourselves, lives, talents, roles. Liturgy is total, and therefore must be more than a mere rational intellectual exercise. That's actually true. Valid tradition reflects this attention to the whole person. So yada, yada, yada we get. So anyway, we're going to go back to this first thing I found. This again is on page, let me move my screen. There we go. This is again on page 12 that you can find if you're following along in your PDFs. It's like class, right? Turn to page 12, friends. And here we go. Page 12, which is actually really page 9, point number 7. Right. So the point I was trying to make with this first one is that I fundamentally actually disagree with this premise here. All words and art forms can be used to praise God in the liturgical assembly. That's a really fancy way of saying the Mass, right? then we look for criteria to judge music, architecture, and other arts. No, there are some pieces of art, and I certainly know this, there are some pieces of music that I would say are not fitting to celebrate the risen God, right? It's self-evident. It's one of those things that's very funny. Obviously, post especially the First World War, when you had the rise of postmodernism, art forms were not focused on divine ideals. They were not focused on order, right? God's creation. Art began to turn very inward. It was a complete runaway of humanism in the worst form. And of course, in the 60s and in the 70s, that only continues. So the idea that all words and art forms can be used to praise God in the liturgical assembly, it's no wonder that we saw such a bloodletting following the council. Because suddenly, if you think that polyphony, Palestrina, is just as valid as the mamas and the papas when it comes to mass, you have another thing coming. So that was the first thing I found. The next place we're going to jump to is page 13 here. This is, which is really page 10, but I'm just going by the PDF document up here. And this is point number 9 on the liturgy. Now, I want you to pay special attention again to the language that's being used here. Liturgy has a special and unique place in the life of Christians in the local churches, their communities of faith. Each church gathers regularly to praise and thank God, to remember and make present God's great deeds, to offer common prayer, to realize and celebrate the kingdom of peace and justice. That action of the Christian assembly is liturgy. You will not find the words holy sacrifice of the Mass in this entire document. I'm going to type it all right here. Holy sacrifice of the Mass. And look, that phrase is not found. Mass itself appears 4 places. The first place, mass produced, mass manufacturers. The next place is a footnote outside of mass. And the final place is mass produced items, again, here in the glossary. Mass doesn't appear in this document, right? The source, what do they say about the Eucharist in the Second Vatican Council, right? Is it not supposed to be the source and summit of the Christian life? And yet we're not even going to talk about the Mass in any remotely traditional and therefore any discernible terms through this whole thing. If this is a thief for your inner peace, by the way, click off now, but comment along, man. This thing is in for a ride. So again, what have we learned about the liturgy? When you think about what it's like to discover rited liturgy and to put yourself in the presence of God, instead we find out that liturgy, rather, we thank God, which is true. To remember and make present God's great deeds, yes, this is true too. To offer common prayer, yes, of course. To realize and celebrate the kingdom of justice and peace, yes, that's true. But what about the sacrifice? What about the fact that we could not offer God anything except his own body, blood, soul, and divinity at Mass? The whole reason that we gather, right? This is not just why it's not just like a little Eucharistic, or no, they don't even they probably use the word celebration. Eucharistic celebration might be a little too far. Anthony, let me get that chemo. Yeah, man, we are on this. We are on this thing today. Steve, so you're saying we can play Cardi B at Mass? That sounds like liberal inclusion nonsense. Oh, brother, strap in, man, because that's exactly what it is. And now you have to understand that this sort of nonsense was going on even worse in Protestant denominations. So when you hear about those Episcopalian Beyonce masses or Taylor Swift masses or whatever they call them, this is also part of the thought where it comes from. Let's keep trekking, friends. If you've been enjoying, by the way, hey, don't forget to leave a like. We very much appreciate that. I use the royal we. I don't know why. Rudy's dead to me, so it's just me. No, I'm just playing. But seriously, do leave a like, please, if you don't mind. It's just very, very helpful for the channel. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. That's extraordinarily helpful for where we're at, too. I think we're gunning up. I think we're close to another milestone on subscribers. So everyone who subscribes and everyone who likes and comments, certainly, has been just extraordinarily helpful. We're going to jump now to page 21, actually. Page 21. This is point 29. Okay, so this is interesting. We're now moving into what exactly does the assembly do at the Eucharistic banquet, the joyous celebration, whatever words they want to use. The action of the assembly, friends. The most powerful experience of the sacred is found in the celebration and the persons celebrating. That is, it is found in the action of the assembly, the living words, the living gestures, the living sacrifice, the living meal. This was at the heart of the earliest liturgies. Evidence of this is found in their architectural floor plans, which were designed as general gathering spaces, spaces which allowed the whole assembly to be part of the action. If you do not see the altar rails going out with sentences like this, if you do not see brutalist architecture churches in the round being built because of statements like this, this completely will wake you up. The idea here is that, look at this, the most powerful experience of the sacred. Look how humanist this is tainted. The most powerful experience of the sacred, that is to say that of God, is found in the celebration. We're going to talk about the holy sacrifice of the Mass as a lowercase celebration, and the persons celebrating. It's about us, friends, all of a sudden. It's about us. That is, it is found in the action of the assembly, the living words, the living gestures, the living sacrifice, the living meal. The language of the holy sacrifice of the Mass is being again reduced to the Jewish prayer meal. Mass of the Ages did such a good job showing that develop, or rather, what's the opposite of develop? Regress, I suppose. And it's at the heart of the earliest liturgies. You see, they had general gathering spaces, guys. They didn't have these great churches. They had the gathering spaces. So what are you complaining about? Come on, open up the altar rails. Get that tabernacle off to a nice Eucharistic chamber. Hey, why don't we just put the Bugnini box in the middle of the church? And let's make the pews oriented so everyone can see each other. We'll get there, man. But you can kind of see the development. You can definitely see how the worst the reformers, what their true intentions were. This kind of document proves it. I'm gonna hop now to page 23. This is point 33. Let me make sure I found it. Oh, here we go. Okay, so like I said, this book has pictures, and we'll get to that towards the end because they're put at the end, and I think that's when the real disaster of this thing shines through. But first, let's talk about contemporary art. This is probably one of the hottest debates in the church right now, right? And so here's what Environment and Art in Catholic Worship has to say. Contemporary art forms belong to the liturgical expressions of the assembly as surely as art forms of the past. The latter are part of our common memory, our communion, which extends over time as well as over geographical boundaries. Contemporary art is our own, the work of artists of our time and place, and belongs in our celebrations as surely as we do. If liturgy were to incorporate only the acceptable art of the past, conversion, commitment, and tradition would have ceased to live. The assembly should, therefore, be equally unhesitating in searching out, patronizing, and using the arts and media of the past and present. Because it is symbolic communication, liturgy is more dependent on past tradition than many human activities are. Because it is the action of the contemporary assembly, it has to clothe its basically traditional structures with the living flesh and blood of our time and our art. Again, this inward pointing. Chesterton says that tradition is the democracy of the dead. Now, contemporary does not always mean bad. There are some very great contemporary sacred artists who are doing great work. Elizabeth Zelasco is one I think of. She creates iconography still, and they're very beautiful. She just unveiled one recently here in the Archdiocese of Denver. Kevin Allen, you think of, he is a contemporary composer, but nonetheless, he is very much plugged in to the tradition and patrimony that is church music. So I certainly don't think that just because it's old, it's good, and if it's new, it's automatically bad. I don't think that dichotomy is a real one that we should focus in on. But I do think that we have to be careful because you have to put these sorts of words in the context of what's happening. If you think about the fact that this comes out in 1978, 77, as my copy says, then what this essentially is going to start justifying is the felt banners, the guitars in Mass. It's going to start the trash liturgical vestments that were all over this time period, because these are all contemporary to our people in our time. We have something to say. And actually we find this hermeneutic of rupture, right? It's actually divorced from what the tradition of the church is. So we're not taking the great tradition of the church and bringing it into our own time. We're actually kind of departing from it. We are making the Mass in our own image. We're making the church in our own image and our own likeness, not that of God and of the saints who have worked so diligently to give us righted liturgy and to give us righted music. No. That's too much. So again, I do think that, yes, there are some things contemporary churches that are pleasing and good and beautiful, right? good, true, and beautiful. But as you'll see with some of these things, especially when we get to the pictures, not all of them at this time period were, and that's obviously self-evident in our own time when there is such a reeling from the brutalist ways that we built churches, how we took out everything that for generations and centuries before were considered sacred and profound. We've completely done away with all that. We've chopped ourselves off, unfortunately, at the roots. So next up, let's hop to page 25 here. It looks like I'm going to go to point 59. Actually, let's see. 25, page 25, which is actually page 32. Whoopsie. Must have gotten this confused. Let's hop down a little bit to page 32. Like I said, you guys are more than welcome to follow along. And I do encourage you, if this isn't going to be a thief of your inner peace, to read it yourself. Here we go. On processions and dance. So this is it, friends. So when we were thinking about how the heck did liturgical dance creep into the church, buckle up, buttercups, because this is how it was done right here. Processions. Beyond seeing what is done, because good liturgy is ritual action, it is important that worship spaces allow for movement. Worship spaces allow for movement. Processions and interpretations through bodily movement, dance, can become meaningful parts of the liturgical celebration if done by truly competent persons in a manner that befits the total liturgical action. I've yet to see a liturgical dance, by the way, that befits the liturgical action. And I couldn't even imagine what liturgical dance would look like in the traditional Latin Mass. And neither could the Reformers, which is why suddenly we have the Novus Ordo. A procession should move from one place to another with some purpose, not simply around the same space. And should normally include the congregation, sometimes with stops or stations for particular prayers, readings, or actions. I want to know what they mean by processions in this case. Are they talking about during Mass? I mean, they're talking about the total liturgical action. Good liturgy is ritual action, which means that we're talking about things that happen during Mass. You can't just have routine, right, where the priest and the deacon and the crucifer come from the back of the church to the front of the church. No, friends. That's boring. Let's go ahead and spruce it up a little bit. As it says, it should move from one place to another with some purpose, not simply around the same space, and should normally include the congregation, sometimes with stops or stations for particular prayers, readings, or actions. If you've ever seen a procession where a priest might stop and say hello to people or give coloring books out to kids, as a friend of mine had happened to his daughters, this might be where it comes from. The design of the space and arrangement of the seating, here we go, should allow for this sort of movement. There should be concern for the quality, the gracefulness, and the surety of this movement. Seating arrangements which prohibit the freedom of action to take place are inappropriate. If you like your stuffy church as it looks, right, with the straight pews that go right up to the altar rails, which beyond happens to be an altar that is against the wall, and right there beyond the altar up a little bit is the tabernacle. If you like that, guys, it's not hip. It's not cool enough. It's not inspiring total liturgical action, which sounds like the greatest Catholic action film I could possibly imagine. So let's do away with it. Instead, let's build a church that's going to allow us to move out a little bit more and to interact with the congregation, because really, once again, you're going to notice all throughout this book, it's really about us. Not what's pleasing to God, not what has been the great mind of the church for centuries. It's about what we have to say, and to hell with everyone else that's come before. So if you want to know where liturgical dance comes from, that's it. I'm going to read this second one here. This is 60.60. In the general movement of the liturgical rite, what does that even mean? The role of the one who presides is critical and central. The area of presiding should allow that person to be attentive to and present to the entire congregation, the other ministers, and each part of the liturgical action, even if not personally leading the action at the moment. The place should allow one to conduct the various ministers in their specific activity and roles of leadership, as well as a congregation in its common prayer. Well, it's a good thing that we did figure this out for thousands of years before, because I don't think that there's much you need to change if you watch how a solemn high mass happens. Everyone seems to know what they're up to, and they move around each other very well. Maybe there's a question of how big should the sanctuary be to allow for the movement of the priest and the other ministers up on the altar? How should a space be oriented so that pews are comfortable and that people have a touch of comfort, right, just when it comes to their own movements, therefore, but we don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Unless, of course, in the late 70s, in which case, yeah, totally throw that baby out with the bathwater. We'll move here to page 40 now. We're almost to the end of kind of the points I'm making, and then I'll get to these illustrations. So for those who have just been wondering, what exactly does this look like in motion? Oh, friends, we're about to see. We're about to see. Okay, so page 40, which is really 37.71, the altar. Okay, here we go. How did the altar get moved into a Eucharistic worship space? How did the altar, or no, I'm sorry, that was a tabernacle. How did the altar become a Bugnini box, which is what I call those more rectangular altars? Well, let's find out. The altar, the holy table, should be most noble, most beautifully designed and constructed. Oh, the most beautifully designed and constructed table the community can provide. Yeah, how many times have we seen that, friends? It is the common table of the assembly, a symbol of the Lord, at which the presiding minister stands and upon which are placed the bread and wine and their vessels and the book. Notice the language, right? There is no talk about the Eucharist, body, blood, soul, and divinity. There's no talk about the sacrifice, the holy sacrifice of the Mass, the importance of the altar to be looked at as a table of sacrifice, right? This goes all the way back through Melchizedek to Abraham. None of that's now. So here we go. It is holy and sacred to this assembly's action and sharing, so it is never used as a table of convenience or as a resting place for papers, notes, cruets, or anything else. For the most part, that has held up. Sometimes I see cruets on the altar every once in a while, if it's a small place, and maybe I'll give an exception. It stands free, approachable from, this is it, right? Check it. It stands free, approachable from every side, capable of being encircled. Well, why would you want to encircle the altar? Because of things like we talked about earlier. Because if you're going to do liturgical dance and movements and everything, you're going to want that space to maneuver. You're going to need to put that thing out towards the center and certainly away from the wall. It is desirable that candles, cross, any flowers or decoration in the area should not be so close to the altar as to constitute impediments to anyone's approach or movement around the common table. The altar has become, friends, a common table because this is where the people of God gather for a meal, just like you will later that night on Sunday, right? So again, when you're trying to figure out, like, what did they talk about? How did the reformers actually do this stuff? Now you're going to see. This is a kind of funny aside, but I saw this on the baptistry, and you're going to see why I particularly pulled this one out. To speak of symbols and of sacramental signification is to indicate that immersion is the fuller and more appropriate symbolic action in baptism. Okay, so we're going back to our roots and maybe closer to some Protestants. And so actually baptism by sprinkling, it's blasé, it's so Trent, it's so Constantine. No, friends, we're going to go to baptism by immersion. So new baptismal fonts, therefore, should be constructed to allow for the immersion of infants at least, and to allow for the pouring of water over the entire body of a child or adult. Where fonts are not so constructed, the use of a portable one is recommended. Listen, I don't really have a dog in the fight on the immersion versus sprinkling debate. There are different rites in the church that focus more on immersion, and I think that's great. I think there's an obviously historical thing. Catholics, we focus more on sprinkling when it comes to baptism. It'll do the trick, right? It'll do the same thing. And so I don't mind that. I don't mind the idea of immersion, but you're beginning to understand why the baptistries went out the window. You're beginning to understand why you saw all those portable ones suddenly pop up. And you're beginning to also understand why the baptismal pools that you see at all those suburban Novus Ordos also came into existence because of things like this. We're actually going to indicate immersion is the fuller and more appropriate symbolic action in baptism. And while I think that there's a lot of theology and a lot of discussion and also the differences of the rites to unpack there, here in the Western Rite, most of our baptism is still done by sprinkling, not done in the swimming pools that are all over churches nowadays. Let's see, we're on page 42. So just a couple more points here. Oh man. This part is really fun. This starts getting into what should images look like and all the instruments utilized during the liturgy. So we're gunning. So I loved point 99 here. Because look at this. Look how declaratory it is about our time and our space. In a period of church and liturgical renewal, The attempt to recover a solid grasp of church and faith and rites involves a rejection of certain embellishments which have in the course of history become hindrances. In many areas of religious practice, this means a simplifying and a refocusing on primary symbols. In buildings, this effort has resulted in more austere interiors with fewer objects on the walls and in the corners. Read between the lines here. A solid grasp of church and faith and rites involves a rejection of certain embellishments, which have in the course of history become hindrances. Guys, this is talking about the side altars. This is talking about the statues of St. Joseph and Our Lady. This is talking about, in some places, especially here in the 70s, the Stations of the Cross. This is talking about a lot of the beauty that would make for when you think of what the inside of a Catholic church should look on. Instead, we're going to become more austere with our interiors, fewer objects on the walls and in the corners. This is why you've walked into so many churches in your life and it feels like it's bare bone. And as we'll get to those images in a little bit, you'll see exactly what they meant. There was no confusion here. And then I want to read on. This is point 100. And so furthermore, so not only are we taking out those hindrances because we need to find a more simple and authentic faith, right? And so these beautiful statues and the stained glass and the choir lofts, no, these things are all hindrances. Point 100 here. Many new or renovated liturgical spaces, therefore, invite temporary decoration for particular celebrations, feasts, and seasons. What could those temporary decorations mean, friends? Banners and hangings of various sorts are both popular and appropriate, as long as the nature of these art forms is respected. They are creations of forms, colors, and textures, rather than signboards to which words must be attached. Except when you have those banners that have generic Christian words like love and peace and happiness. Their purpose is to appeal to the senses and thereby create an atmosphere and a mood rather than to impress a slogan upon the minds of observers or deliver a verbal message. This point 100 here, friends, is why you have felt banners. Point 100 is why you have like weird seasonal things that flick and flitter throughout churches every once in a while. And they're apparently popular and appropriate in 1978. How are they doing on that popularity and appropriateness right now? This is why, what did they say, right? That those who are married to this age will be widows to the next. The church is not going for what's just popular. It's important to have an attachment, of course, to many of the liturgical devices that we have, sacramentals, the beauty of statues, the beauty of a church, of course. But that's not really the main reason why the church does something. The church does something because it knows it's going to be ultimately edifying for souls. When it comes to how we should worship God, the church has, through her great wisdom, through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, has given as right of the liturgy as we could imagine, not just here in the Roman Rite, but all across the great rites of the church. Those have been given. Those have been both culturally very significant for peoples, but also they have given us the close connection that we need to in order to realize that our Lord is still amongst us, that he's still our Savior, and that we need his grace. We cannot merit our own salvation, that we still desperately need God. Or you can just condense it all down to a banner. I guess that also would work. That'd probably be okay. This is an interesting point I found. Okay, so this is page 53. This is point 50. Oh, that can't be right. Oh, point 104. Got it right here. Okay. So we're living out this one right now. This is audio visuals, guys. So if you walked into a church and they have the flipping screens, the projector screens that come down. Oh, and God forbid the actual like the banners that the screens themselves that come down. This might be why. It is too early to predict the effect of contemporary audiovisual media, films, videotape, records, tapes on the public worship of Christians. It is safe to say that a new church building or renovation project should make provision for screens and or walls that will make the projection of films, slides, and film strips visible to the entire assembly, as well as an audio system capable of fine electronic reproduction of sound. We're not going to build our churches with decent acoustics naturally for the sake of polyphony. We're just going to get some microphones and call it a day. Also, the closest I've seen in my childhood of the audio visuals before I've seen more of the projector sort of thing, which happened, I think, when I was probably a little bit later in my boyhood, was every once a year. Do you guys remember when in Denver, I think it was called Returning God's Gift, but it's the bishop's campaign, annual campaign. And so instead of a homily, they would wheel out this TV in front of the altar, and we would all watch the bishop's appeal, which was one of my cringiest remembrances from Mass. I hated it every single time, even as a boy, because it was just so stilted and strange. I think it would have been far better for priests who are decent homilists to really talk about the importance of what His Excellency asks for, or the bishop just to have written a letter. But audio visuals, guys, this is the world that I live in, and I love audio visuals, just not for Mass. And then I love how they're trying to parallel this. Look, there seems to be a parallel between the new visual media and the traditional function of stained glass. Don't do it. Now that the easily printed word has lost its grip on popular communication, the neglect of audiovisual possibilities is a serious fault. Skill in using these media in ways which will not reduce the congregation to an audience or passive state can be gained only by experience. Yeah, that's true. I do, however, think that churches should be pretty modern on their audio visuals when it comes to their parish halls, for instance. I think that we don't need to live in a completely like a bread box after Mass. But no, I'm not a fan of a lot of technology during Mass. My joke is that, coming from the film world, which I inhabit, right, that I want my liturgy as old and beautiful as possible, but I want to be able to film it, ironically, in 8K 60 frames per second. So while I don't want my Mass itself to be polluted by technology, I do want to film it. It's like Warhammer 40K in the Catholic Church, man. And we're in a really metal time period. Okay, and then that was my last kind of point to make with the words here, because oh my gosh. Let's see. We're gonna go now to page 60, because this is the moment you've been waiting for, ladies and gentlemen. This is an actual application of what we've just read, a part of what we just read, in motion. What does this document actually mean? Well, thank God they've given us visual clues, as well as different parts of the document we've read, that will tell us about what we're seeing and why we're seeing. So let's go through these images, guys. If you stuck around here, you definitely deserve it. First, I'll read some comments here. Steve Lovett. This sounds like Protestantism. It's about celebrating us in the assembly. No, it's about worshiping Him. Yeah, this is completely true. And it's pretty wild to be a Catholic and to claim we're held to scripture, magisterium, and tradition, yet they're trying to remove the tradition. Yeah, again, this is very, very sad, and also obviously very, very true. So the very good observations. Okay, let's get down to these images. So those who are listening by audio, again, I will post the PDF below, but this starts on about page 60. So here we go. We got this nice chair here in a corner, I guess, and it says, to identify liturgy as an important personal communal religious experience is to see the virtue of simplicity and commonness. You can see the emphasis of commonness. This looks like just a room in any random house, but it's a random picture of a chair. So I guess this is supposed to invoke liturgy. And look at these doors. I've seen these in churches, man. They must have filmed this in Los Angeles or shot this in Los Angeles. But apparently this is invoking simplicity and commonness. So if you do not feel closer to the God of the universe by looking at this stuff, there's something wrong with you, you rad trad. Here we have a processional cross, and it's being seated next to these very, very nice 1970s chairs that look like they're out of the cathedral in Los Angeles. Oh, and here we go. This is our first example of a church. This is what a church should look like. Look at this modernist bell tower. I'm sorry. Look at this contemporary bell tower. And I guess this is the entrance. Your guess is as good as mine. But I love the blurb here. Quality is perceived only by contemplation, by standing back from things and really trying to see them, trying to let them speak to the beholder. What is that? What does that? I'm not a dumb guy. But what does that mean? Quality is perceived only by contemplation, by standing back from things and really trying to see them, trying to let them speak to the beholder. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So this is quality. This is the example of quality that they're using. If you look at this and think this is a really ugly church exterior, there's something wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with the quality. Take it all in, guys. This is the springtime of the new evangelization. This is what the people want. I don't know what I'm looking at here. I think this is a candle on a shelf. Oh, is this a tabernacle? Is this the red lamp? Is a red candle, sorry. And then is this a tabernacle? Is this anyway, let's see what it says. Contemplation sees the hand stamp of the artist, the honesty and care that went into an object's making, the pleasing form and color and texture. And of course, because this is in black and white, it's ironic that you can't see any color and it's hard to deduce texture. Contemplation sees the hand. It doesn't, these are liberal word salads, right? This is the same kind of writing that you see in all those trash articles and in documents that come out of the Vatican, where it's just doesn't say anything. Contemplation sees the hand stamp of the artist, the honesty and care that went into an object's making. Contemplation of the pleasing form and color and texture. Well, what if it's not a pleasing form? Chat, you let me know. Is this a pleasing form? Does this get us closer or farther to God? Your guess is as good as mine. Here we go. So this is what a church should look like. Look how bare bones it is. So did you want a high altar? Did you want altar rails? It's nice that they have pews at least, but there's no restrictions between the congregation and what goes on the altar. This presumably is the altar. Notice how it's off to the right-hand side a little bit, but look what's in the center, the presider's chair, because the most important person isn't Christ. It's going to be us. Again, it's become very man-centric. So if you miss your side altars, if you miss your statues of Saint Joseph and Our Lady of the Angels and of the Saints, again, stop being such a modern, or not modern, stop being such a trad. And so here's another example. So we see here, one should be able to sense something special in everything that is seen and heard. Touched. Touched is put in a different font. 70s, don't do it. You're the reason we're in this mess. And smelled and tasted in liturgy. Oh, Lord. Something special. It's like Christmas morning for like a Hallmark movie. And here we have two priests, it looks like, around the Bugnini box. And it looks like the bishop is in the back there. So cool. Maybe that's Paul VI himself, actually. What is this, 78? John Paul might have just become Pope at that time. These are chairs. So again, that's all I got to say about that. Oh, look, this is our first shot of a minimal, but maybe a kind of decent church. It could be more ornate, but the altar, there's the, you know what I just realized? In these other pictures inside the sanctuary, we have not seen one crucifix. This is a cross, a processional cross. I've not seen a crucifix on the back wall. Certainly no high altar, but this is the first time. I think maybe this could be an intact high altar still, but it's hard to tell in this picture. But of course, I think that the statue of Saint Joseph is still there on the right. So presumably Our Lady is there on the left. So churches were not being built very pretty at this time, and they hadn't been built pretty for a little bit of time since the 70s. So even down in the 50s, a lot of churches were pretty minimal and not terribly pleasing to the eye. But this is a little bit better. However, look what they say here. The location of the altar will be central in any Eucharistic celebration, but this does not mean it must be spatially in the center or on a central axis. So look at this image again, friends. This is image 9. This is a centered altar, right? We look like it at any traditional church. The pews on the left and the right. We're going straight down the middle there. And apparently 10 is after renovation. So let's see what happened in the 70s here when they decided to renovate what is a not necessarily ornate, but nonetheless, I think a space that's very pleasing for Catholic worship. This is actually very sad. Pretty sanguine about this whole thing. I'm kind of memey about this whole thing. This is actually very sad. For those you who've seen, let's go again. This is the before, and this is the after. They took away the crucifix. They took away the high altar. They put a Bugnini box kind of here. They wrecked it. They completely wrecked it. The tabernacle, look at this. The tabernacle is in a squat box off to the right-hand side. The presider's chair, and an ugly presider's chair at that, is right there dead in the center. And next to it is the processional cross. So once more, I want you to remember that when there are people in your lives who criticize trads, why are you guys mad or sad or angry or distressed or in a fighty mood about restoring what churches look like? This is what happens because we started out with this, and this is what they gave you. So when people try to get around what did the reformers actually mean, they'll stick on the doctrines of Vatican II because they're ambiguous, but maybe they can be interpreted rightly. This is the kind of stuff that had crept in, certainly to the church, and especially here in America. That's terrible. I don't know where this is, but that's just absolutely terrible. And here's another shot of it. Okay, so let's go back just one more time. This is what it looked like before. Not as ornate, but nonetheless rated for Catholic worship. And this is what it is now. It is uglier, or about in par with what I think the altar looks like at the cathedral in Los Angeles. It's man-centric. Look at how the pews look now. Look at how the ambo. There is no reflection of the divine in any of this. That's very sad to see. There's just isn't. If you told me what kind of church this was, what denomination it was, I couldn't tell you. I'd probably tell you it was a more modern sort of Protestantism, like Universalist. That's what I'd probably say. Universalist with a slight Christian sensibility. But I want to read this. Liturgy flourishes in a climate of hospitality, a situation in which people are comfortable with one another, a space in which people are seated in view of one another, as well as the focal points of the rite. That terrible, terrible sentence justifies churches in the round. What a liturgy flourishes in a climate of hospitality. I don't go to Mass to feel all are welcome. I go to Mass because I am a sinner in need of salvation, and Christ offers himself, body, blood, soul, and divinity for me. That's why I go to Mass. I don't go because I want to shake hands and sing Kumbaya. It's nice to be connected with the others in the congregation, but that's not primarily why we have the Mass. We have the Mass because it was instituted by God himself while he was on earth. And he gave us a commandment: do this in remembrance of me. This is the mind of the worst of the reformers. It's all about us. People are comfortable with one another, a space which people are seated in view of one another, as well as the focal points of the rite. It's all about us. Nothing here points to God. I don't realize it was going to be such a mad trad tonight, but honestly, seeing that recavation made me very, very sad. So we'll continue. Oh no. Okay. Beautiful, beautiful church here. Ornate. The altars is beautiful. The high altar is incredible. Man, I'm like actually scared, guys. What did they do to this place? So this is the before. So this is what this place is, I would say, perfect for Catholic worship. This tells you everything you need to know. I could tell you the denomination. I can tell you the seriousness in which we take the holy sacrifice of the Mass. I can tell you the importance of aesthetics and architectural design that went into this place, even down to lighting. I know it's hard to see, but I love these little chandeliers that are on the side of each of these pillars. Okay, so here we go. I want to read the blurb first. In the renovation of spaces built in a former period, there is no substitute for ecclesiology that is both ancient and modern in the fullest sense. All right, this is before renovation. Take a good look. And here's after. Oh goodness. Okay, so here's before again, which is chef's kiss. This is what a lot of churches are spending a lot of money on, bleeding their congregations dry to try to get back to. And God bless them, because I know that there's a lot of architects who fight for this and a lot of congregations who really want their churches to look like this. This is what these people did to you, friends. How ornate it was. Look how stripped away it is. They took away the chandeliers. Thank God. It looks like this on the right is to Jesus' Sacred Heart, which is good. Hard to tell what's on the left-hand side. But what they've done is they've kept the high altar. They have completely, oh Lord. The windows are still there. Sorry, I'm bouncing back and forth so much. It looks like they painted over whatever was in the ceiling. You know what I'll do? I'm sorry for bouncing back and forward. I have the book right here. So let me go to it. Let me find where we're at. I wish I could show these pictures are much better, but you'll certainly get the point. Okay. So yeah, where in the before, beautiful, again, ornate, very well decorated, very beautifully painted. The lighting is so great. Maybe the lighting is just wrong with this one, but obviously there's no more upper lighting here for the very top of the high altar. What you can see though is that they've put the presider's chair smack dab in the middle of where the high altar is. They put it smack dab right there. And out a little bit from this thing is now the Bugnini box. The presider's chair is covering up where the tabernacle would have been seen. I don't know here where the tabernacle is. The ambo, of course, here on the left-hand side. The box, I know it's an altar. I know people are gonna be like, Jordan, you're being so sacrilegious. Like the bones of saints are in altars, even if they're freestanding altars. Yeah, I know, but I think God's gonna understand on this one. Yeah, I don't know where the tabernacle is anymore. Chances are it's probably moved. If God willing, maybe it was moved to one of these side tabernacles, these side altars here. But chances are it's probably off in a reverent liturgical space. And look at this. Contemporary art forms belong to the liturgical expressions of the assembly, as surely as art forms of the past. The latter are part of our common memory. I think that you can have contemporary art, or at least art from our time period, as long as it harkens back to what the patrimony of the church is, because that's what we do. That's what all of church history has done. So this is a really good presider's chair. This is great. It doesn't belong in the center. It belongs off to the side. It looks like this is a altar to St. Joseph's on the left-hand side. And I don't know what saint this is here. But very pretty. I'm glad they probably fought for the architecture a little bit. And yep, on the right-hand side, it looks like, I thought it was our Sacred Heart. Maybe it is an altar. Maybe it is, no, it is Sacred Heart of Jesus. So that's good. So this could have been a lot worse. I would love to see where this place is now. Here's the unfortunate thing. I suspect that this church is probably somewhere in the east, and there are so many churches that are closing down and everything that maybe this place is gone now. That's an unfortunate thing. Forbid it, Almighty God. I wish that it wasn't the case, but that just very well might be what it is. Who knows these things? So we're gonna keep on trucking. Comments. I know, guys. I know this is rough. If you're reading along, look, Anthony, Kamala Harris wrote this. Yeah, this looks like a prison. You better believe it. Man, this is wild. All right, let's keep trucking. We're gonna keep trucking through some of these things. I won't do all of them. We'll go for another 9 minutes. That'll be the top of the hour. I think that'll be good. All furnishings taken together should possess a unity and harmony with each other and with the architecture of the place. Yeah, this is true. So this is a good sentence. However, look what it says. 16, image 16 we're about to see is before. 17 is after, with the new Eucharistic shrine, and 19 expanded traditional confessional made into a chapel of reconciliation. Oh yes, that's right. So the traditional confessionals went out at this time, and this is where you got the whole face-to-face therapy session. I know this is kind of hard to see. I'm sorry. So I'm going to go back to my book so I can best describe what we're looking at here. Okay, so this is Eucharistic shrine. So this would house the Eucharist. It's gorgeous. Oh my gosh, it's absolutely beautiful. I might have to cheat real quick and see where exactly these images are taken, because I think it might be good to find out like where they are now. So let's see. Bear with me. Let me see if I can find. Oh Lord, I just looked at another picture. Here we go. So this comes from St. Mark's Church in Shakopee, Minnesota, built in 1862 to 1868. And the renovation design was by a guy named Frank Kakmarek. And the pastor there was Reverend Francis J. Arrett. Okay, this is St. Mark's Church in Shakopee, Minnesota. We're going to take a break, friends, and we're going to look this up. St. Mark's Church. What is this? How do you spell it? Sorry, I became a golden retriever here for a second. Shakopee, Minnesota. Shakopee. Okay. So let's see what's at. Wow. Oh, okay, guys. So here's what we're dealing with. So now it's Saints Joachim and Anne, and this is this might be a parish condensement now. Let's find out. But because they call it our St. Mark campus. So you can kind of see pictures. Oh, thank God. They'll give us pictures here. So let's see what they've been up to. So this is what it looks like nowadays. Thank God. So it looks like they've added, while some of the original ornamentation is gone, the presider's chair is no longer in the dadgum center. The tabernacle is back to scene. The high altar is intact. Oh, thank God. That makes me so happy. Dang, look at that. The priest here has traditional vestments on. Oh, it's a whoopsie. The priest has traditional vestments on. And it looks like a pretty nice looking congregation. Oh, of course. Unfortunately, they put a choir here on the right hand side because all of a sudden choirs, instead of being elongating choir lofts, now they have to be close to the altar. That's kind of nice. So it looks like they got rid of their original altar rails, but they have put this thing in. So there is some good here, and that's just such a beautiful high altar. But this is the image I was looking at. So it looks like they erected a little place for the choir. That's bad. They probably have a choir loft that is not intact. It looks like this might be a Sunday during Lent. And reading about them, oh goodness, in 2005, a massive electrical fire blazed throughout the interior, eventually being put out with the help of over 150 firefighters from Shakopee and other surrounding cities. The church, originally designed to hold 600 people, was renovated from the inside out with everything replaced except the stained glass windows and pews. Okay, so they're talking about their altar rails and their confessionals. Let's see. Poor lighting made the church quite dark, so for its 50th anniversary, the walls were not only painted white, but the altar as well, a common practice of that era. They remained white until 1976 when Frank Kaczmarek completed an award-winning renovation of the church's interior, especially the sanctuary, according to the Vatican II liturgical guidelines. At the time, the altars were completely dismantled, carefully stripped of their paint, and restored to their original glory. So maybe he did some good, maybe he didn't. But I love how involved this is. So this is good to know. All's well that ends well, except for the fact that I think that this is part of a connected conglomeration of parishes, because this is now under the parish of Saints Joaquin and Anne. So again, we've hemorrhaged so many Catholics that, especially in the East, we have to start truncating parishes, and that's very, very sad. But I'm happy to hear that it's still going strong. It looks like for Sundays, it's 3 parishes, looks like. So St. Mary's, one in Marystown, and then St. Mark's will have a 10 o'clock mass that's live streamed. And then there's a Spanish mass and also a 5 o'clock. So the St. Mark campus is still going really strong. That's good to see. That makes me happy. So we won't spend too much time on that. Here's an interior of a place. This could be a lot worse. I like the medieval feel, but you could have something just a touch more ornate in the back. And this probably is a monastery or something, honestly, guys. Here for image 20, I have the notes right here that'll tell us what time is it. We're having so much fun. Like this is such a crazy read. This has been such a roller coaster of emotions. This is the new Melleray Abbey Church in Dubuque, Iowa. So real quick, I'm just gonna type in new Melleray Abbey, Iowa. Are these the ones I like? Are these the ones in Iowa I like? They're Cistercians. Okay. So good. Okay, so this place is still happening. What's happening at the Abbey? That's good. This is probably the reverse of what we just saw here. I'll have to do, you know what I'll do, guys? I'll do a later video because I don't want to just keep ping-ponging back and forth. But I'd love to do it before and after, like where are they now? Oh, Lord. And there's that ambo, which is right here, presumably. So, I'll talk about that one. A renovation can respect both the best qualities of the original structure and the requirements of contemporary worship. These people are crazy, man. What are the requirements of contemporary worship? They're the same requirements our ancestors have been doing for thousands of years. You know, it doesn't mean that the mass doesn't change. It doesn't mean the developments don't get introduced. St. Joseph in the canon and in the missal is a great change, but it doesn't mean we have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So, I think we kind of get the point. This will be our last one. This is the exterior of a church. This is 25, which is this is a church of St. John the Evangelist in Hopkins, Minnesota. So the building or cover enclosing the architectural space is a shelter or skin for liturgical action. No, okay. Its integrity, simplicity, and beauty. Is this integrity, simplicity, and beauty? Goodness gracious. Its physical location and the landscape should take into account the neighborhood, city, and area which it was being built. Do the people of Minnesota deserve a church like this? Are y'all just messing up in Minnesota? This will be our last one, guys. There's plenty more images to go through, but I want to just kind of type in this one just for kicks and giggles. St. John the Evangelist in Hopkins, Minnesota. Let's see how they're doing in Hopkins, Minnesota. Let's see how they're doing. Yep. So it's another truncation. So now it's St. Gabriel the Archangel at St. John's campus. I'm afraid that I don't have much more information on that. This is one of those times where utilizing DuckDuckGo instead of Google doesn't really get you the best, kind of stuff. So we'll just kind of see, but looks like, again, it's like a lot of what's going on in the East in particular. That's it now. That's the inside. So they have a crucifix in the back. That's nice. I'm of course not ratting on the people who really fight to keep their churches going. I very much love people who stayed through the revocations and really tried to raise their families right in the faith. It's not a criticism of their faith at all. Your rewards will be great in heaven, but it's just a recognition that these reformers set off these terrible ticking time bombs, and now we are all paying for it. And that's what it looked like before. You can see a baptism pool, and the slats are still there. See, that's what these are. So that's kind of interesting. So guys, we'll definitely have to do an episode where we just kind of look at the before and after and see where are they now for all these churches. But I would, we'll get to this too. But I think that's probably a good stopping point. So what is the takeaway? Okay, what should we worry about? Let's maybe find a more pleasing image to end on, because I don't want these people to have the last laugh here. Listen, God is always on the move. This was a time period in the church where there was a lot of struggle, and it hurt a lot of people. There were millions of Catholics who were so scandalized. Their faiths, it seemed, had changed so dramatically. The church was making such ridiculous changes, because you have to remember, most Catholics are all time, space, and history. It's not necessarily what comes straight out of the Vatican. Your experience, your expression of the faith is going to come through your local parish. At best, maybe you know your bishop. The amount of Catholics who've met the Pope or knew what the Pope was writing is very, very small in our history. So the fact that in their local places, after being raised in the Catholic faith, coming from Catholic families, maybe going to Catholic school, teaching their children, to have all this ripped away from them, and to be given instead the kind of swarmy liberalism that pours forth from this book, it makes sense that we're seeing the results that we're seeing. The hemorrhaging of the clergy and religious, the destruction of baptisms and marriages. The faith for a time felt inauthentic. In a lot of places, I'm sure it still very much feels inauthentic. And the teeth, the patrimony of the church, the reasons that the church gave us the beauty of church architecture and sacred music, and how to structure ourselves that we may look in a church and we may understand immediately that we're in the presence of God. These reformers stripped a lot of that away, gleefully did so. For the case of being austere and simplifying and these things, they also forgot that the majority of people have a very simple faith. The gospel of the poor, ironically, beautiful churches, good church architecture, the importance of guided liturgy is the best testament to the gospel of the poor. People who are not going to read liturgical manuals, who are not going to take a theology class, can go into a church and know that this is a place as fitting as humans can make it for the worship of God in his body, his blood, his soul, and divinity. And when we strip that away, that fragility, it completely collapsed across all of the second half of last century, and we are still facing ramifications. They're now saying that instead of for one Catholic coming in and 6 leaving, it's now up to 1 and 8, because COVID aged the church a decade, I believe. That's very, very sad. But also, we can't lose hope. I have seen so many parishes trying to renovate themselves. So many parishes understanding the importance of altar rails, moving the presider's chair, because it's not fundamentally about the priest, right? The priest is acting in persona Christi, but it's about Christ. The importance of being able to see the tabernacle, the importance of being able to have a proper altar, the importance of not focusing on us in the liturgy, but focusing on God. I'm seeing that all over. That is our fight, friends, for the next, probably the rest of our lives, to be honest with you. I actually believe this fight will get easier, just as the generation that wrote Environment and Art in Catholic Worship goes to their eternal reward. Those priests who gleefully, and nuns who gleefully wrecked everything, goes to their eternal reward. I think that we will see the ship righting itself, but it's going to take time and effort and prayer and money and the consolidation of dioceses. So we have to be prepared for that fight. We have to really be prepared to not let the reformers, the worst of the reformers, win. because it's not their church. It's not even our church. It's God's church. And God is, I believe, very actively sorting it out right now. So if there's any hopeful little strand to take, I know that we've gone through a lot of what might be a very, very unfortunate history, but we will always be able to endure this because Christ reigns, right? He does indeed. I love what you say there, Steve. We can endure this. His will be done. Have faith because the gates of hell will not prevail. Our Lord Jesus will always guide his church. That is completely and 100% true. And I'm very, very happy that you said it. So I think it's a great place to stop here. Do share the stream if you've enjoyed this video as best as you can enjoy it. Hey, we're very much appreciative. I don't know why I keep saying we. I'm very much appreciative. Please don't forget to like the video. And if you haven't already, to subscribe. And also, if you want to support the show further, go on and check out our Patreon. That's going to be at patreon.com/GladTradPodcast, as well as become a channel member. Also, you can just hit that channel join button down below. It'd be very, very helpful, guys, to just show your love for the channel. And here during Lent, please continue to pray for me, a sinner, and I assuredly will continue to pray for all of you. And again, if you want to read this, I don't know why, but if you want to, that PDF is down below. So until next time, God bless you and Mary keep you. Adios.